China, which was called the world's factory, is facing the biggest trouble in 2025.
China.
They were making from us $1 trillion a year.
Wherever you look, factories are sitting empty. Lots of people haven't been paid on time, so they've hit the streets to protest. Apartment buildings are left half finished. More than 60 million unfinished homes. On April 9th, 2025, President Trump rolled out his Liberation Day measures, imposing a 34% reciprocal tariff on a broad swath of Chinese imports, everything from electronics to industrial machinery. Within days, Beijing struck back, matching the 34% rate on key U.S. exports, such as soybeans, pork, and aircraft parts. Not satisfied, the U.S. then raised China's specific rate to roughly 54%. China responded a second time, targeting a new batch of American goods. Finally, as of now, the tariff rate on China is currently around 145%. Nearly 70% of U.S. buyers canceled their orders overnight. They didn't want to pay $2,450 for goods that normally cost $1,000, with the extra $1,450 all going to tariffs.
Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days.
As we create this video, the U.S. and China have agreed to a 90-day pause in their tariff war, slashing U.S. duties on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, and China's tariffs on U.S. goods from 125% to 10%. And negotiations continue. Is this trade war the only reason for China's downfall? Let's dive into the history. Back in the 1970s, China was running on a shoestring, mostly farming, almost no exports. Starting in 1978, Deng Xiaoping's reforms opened the doors. First factories for local needs, then big export zones. By 2020, China made nearly 14% of the world's exports and grew at about 6% annually for decades. Then came 2020 and COVID-19. Factories shut down, borders closed, and families everywhere paid a price, both in lost lives and lost livelihoods. The world blamed China for hiding early data and downplaying the outbreak, which hurt its reputation just as the trade war was heating up.
Now, China does not, it appears, want to accept the blame for the origins of the coronavirus pandemic.
In China, most people put their life savings into real estate instead of stocks or other investments. Owning a home isn't just about having a place to live, it's a badge of success and often a prerequisite for getting married. The government encouraged this by giving cheap loans to developers and working with state-owned banks to keep the housing boom rolling. For years, it seemed like a perfect plan. Home prices doubled or even tripled in some cities. Banks raked in profits on mortgage interest. Developers rushed to build more and more apartment blocks. But that bubble was built on borrowed money. And when you borrow too much, it only takes one stumble for everything to come crashing down. On September 20th, 2021, Evergrande, the nation's biggest real estate developer, missed a $2 billion bond payment. For millions of Chinese families who had poured their life savings into Evergrande projects, it was a nightmare. Here's how it happened. Evergrande would lease land from local governments and immediately start pre-selling apartments using fancy 3D renderings. Buyers paid up front, often in full, to secure their future homes. But instead of finishing those buildings, Evergrande used the money to lease more land and launch new sales. It was an endless cycle of borrowing and selling with nearly $300 billion in debt stacked. When the government saw how things were, they tried to fix it. They made new rules so developers couldn't borrow too much. But Evergrande and its rivals were already buried in debt. Without new money, they couldn't finish the apartments they already sold. Evergrande defaulted first, but it wasn't alone. Other big builders like Sunac and Fantasia also missed payments. All of a sudden, people realized they had paid for homes that might never be built. Homeowners got angry. They started groups online and decided to stop making mortgage payments on these unfinished apartments. It started with a handful of families, then spread to dozens of neighborhoods, then hundreds, and soon thousands of people in at least 20 provinces refused to pay. Banks were in full panic mode. They depend on mortgage payments to keep the lights on. And when those checks stopped, their whole business model shook. Without actual apartments to repossess, because so many buildings never got finished, they had no way to recover the lost loan amounts. In a desperate move, some banks began freezing customer accounts. Imagine already losing your life savings and your future home, and then discovering you can't even take out cash to buy food for your family. People reported ATM machines blocking withdrawals and bank apps showing zero balances even when money was there. For many families, it was the worst of all worlds. They paid thousands of dollars up front for an apartment that wouldn't exist, continued making mortgage payments on nothing, and finally found their own bank accounts locked. Now people have taken it to the streets in big protests. The government tried to silence them, deleting posts online, arresting organizers, and acting like the problem didn't exist. But you can't erase tens of thousands of families, retirees, students, and young couples who've lost their life savings and their dreams of owning a home. As the protests grew, the housing market kept crashing. Month after month, home prices slid lower. Anyone who had invested even a little saw their money vanish. Today, there are over 60 million empty homes across China, buildings that were finished but never sold. The total value of these unsold properties is around $13 trillion, roughly half of China's annual GDP. Parents who borrowed against everything to help their kids get married are now left with nothing. Young couples hoping to start a family can't find a place to live. And retirees who put their retirement into real estate now face uncertainty about where they'll live or how they'll survive. No amount of censorship can cover up that kind of heartbreak. When a crisis touches millions, it simply can't be ignored. Back in China, factories that had borrowed heavily to stock up on raw materials suddenly faced a cash crunch. Banks, seeing loan payments go unpaid, started sending collectors to factories and suppliers. Small business owners are really hurting. With so many orders canceled, a lot of them went broke. Some had to sell their machines for scrap just to cover bills, getting almost nothing in return. Others just shut down overnight, leaving workers confused and without a final paycheck. At the ports, it's a clear sign of trouble. Instead of full ships, you see vessels leaving half empty. Where docks used to be stacked with containers waiting to go overseas, now ships sail away with only half their hold filled. For years, those busy ports showed how strong China's exports were. Now they stand as a reminder of how quickly things can change with export. Many businesses don't know where their next order will come from. Many American companies aren't waiting around. Big names like Apple have quietly shifted millions of dollars worth of orders to Vietnam and India to dodge the high tariffs. That means factories in China are losing huge contracts and jobs. In another bold move, Beijing told its state-owned airlines to stop buying planes from Boeing, the US aviation giant. On paper, it's a show of strength, but it could backfire. Hundreds of Boeing jets already crisscross Chinese skies, and those planes need parts and maintenance from Boeing. If airlines can't get genuine parts or timely service, you're looking at grounded fleets or worse, safety risks. If this tariff fight keeps going, China could hit some serious roadblocks. Right now, a big chunk of its factories rely on selling goods overseas. But with those export orders drying up, Chinese companies can't count on domestic shoppers to pick up the slack. Ordinary people at home just don't buy TVs, clothes, and smartphones in the same huge quantities that America and Europe used to. At the same time, President Xi is cracking down inside China. He's watching social media more closely than ever, blocking or deleting any post about unpaid mortgages, factory shutdowns, or protests we've seen. That tight control can keep unrest quiet for a while, but it doesn't put money back in people's pockets. Here in the US, this trade battle isn't free either. You might have noticed groceries costing more, or your weekly fill-up at the pump hitting you harder. The stock market's had a rough patch too. Lots of folks saw their retirement accounts dip in value. Small businesses that rely on Chinese-made parts are scrambling to find new suppliers, which can mean higher costs and longer waits. China staged its biggest military drill ever around Taiwan. On the water and in the air, hundreds of ships and jets fanned out to surround the island. It wasn't just a show of force. China's Navy, Air Force, and Army were practicing how to completely cut off Taiwan by sea and air. They even brought out hypersonic anti-ship missiles, the kind that can strike moving targets at incredible speed. Analysts saw this as a direct warning to the US. Don't interfere. Beijing released a video simulating missile hits on Taiwanese cities like Taichung and Hualien, making it clear they want Taiwan isolated. These drills aren't random. In December 2024, China ran another huge exercise with nearly 90 warships and dozens of aircraft, the biggest in decades. And back in October, Taiwan tracked 125 Chinese fighter jets and 34 warships swarming close by. But the tone now is different. It feels less like a drill and more like preparation for an actual takeover. Why this sudden show of muscle? Part of it is tied to the trade war choking China's economy. Factories are idling, exports have plunged under steep US tariffs, and millions of workers face layoffs. In a system that prizes control and image, Xi Jinping can't afford to look weak at home. Military strength becomes a distraction and a way to rally national pride. Will the US trade war drag down China's economy, or will China come back even stronger?